And welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn. I am your host, Michael Grace, coming to you not from the podcast studio. I'm actually coming to you from my man room here at my home. Today, I am joined by Kimberly Spencer. Very excited to have Kimberly with us. She is an award-winning, high-performance, trauma-informed coach and trainer. She's an Amazon best-selling co-author, international motivational speaker, and the founder of crownyourself.com, which helps visionary leaders transform their self-limiting stories, stand out authentically, build their empire, and achieve their full potential. Kimberly, thank you for joining us here on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. It is a pleasure to be here, unicorn to unicorn.
There we go. Kimberly must have chosen me because I don't know who else would be more authentic than somebody who declares themselves a unicorn. And I've had little kids tell me, they've said, "You're not a real unicorn." I'm like, "Oh, could you tell me the other real unicorns that you've met?" Like, come on. So
yeah,
awesome.
Talk about busting down plagiarized programming around what a unicorn should look like.
Right, I'm breaking the stereotypes.
Break
right
the mold.
I love it. So a little bit about you. Feel free to share anything else about you, your journey, writing a book. How did you get to where you are?
Yeah, so my journey, it makes sense in hindsight, but while on the process, it looks like my career is very scattered. I started out originally in entertainment and in Hollywood screenwriting and acting, and my vision was to become like the female Clint Eastwood and write and produce and direct all my own films. And
Nice.
simultaneously, while I was in that field, I needed a bridge job, which I started teaching Pilates. And through teaching Pilates, I found myself someone who had been battling an eating disorder for 10 years. And yet I found this one form of exercise that I actually loved that made me feel good in my body. I found myself suddenly in a leadership position where people were looking to me for fitness advice. And like prior to teaching Pilates, I had been a exercise-induced asthmatic. I couldn't run a mile to save my life. And
Wow.
I had battled 10 years of bulimia. And so I started leading from a very authentic place, sharing that I really loved what Pilates did for me. I had a process that I was able to sell very easily. And within very, very quickly, I became the youngest, highest paid instructor in the company that I was teaching at. And from there, I taught Pilates for about 10 years, actually. And simultaneously, my dream of being a produced screenwriter came true. And I got produced and distributed through Lionsgate and the films on Netflix. And when I had this like life fulfilling dream come to me, I thought, oh my gosh, this must be it. And I was surprised to find myself only about 80 to 90% fulfilled. And I got curious again, like I had in the past, and I allowed myself to not judge that and think that it was wrong or that I should feel a certain way. And I just accepted the fact that I wasn't 100% fulfilled, and I got curious as to why. And 2 weeks later, after my film premiered, I got a text from a friend of a friend from a friend who had brought her friend and her friend's son to the film. And my friend told me, she said, "I just want to let you know your film changed this kid's life." And I said, "What? Really?" Like, because when you see the movie, like it's a very like a woman who starts Crown Yourself, who considers herself to be a unicorn in a past life. Like, nobody thought that I wrote this film because it's a film called Bro, starring Danny Trejo, and it's about the high flying, hard partying world of freestyle motocross. Very, very masculine driven film. And yet I wrote it, I co-wrote it with the director, and who it was a fun back and forth collaboration. But I had so many people asking me like, "Oh, did you only write the women's parts?" And I was like, "No, I wrote the dudes' parts too." That was the reason why they hired me to write the script. Was I passed off 10 pages of a scene with the three guys walking into a strip club, and the executive producer came back to me and said, "How do you know men so well?" And I said, like three guys in a strip club, not that hard to figure out what they're thinking." No offense. But
I love it.
but basically I this film came out, and when I heard the story of this kid changing his life, I said, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to transform people's stories. And at the same time that the film premiered, I had the opportunity to come on board of a e-commerce startup as a consultant. It was a startup that was taking a backstretching device to market. I saw the product, I tested it, I saw the value of it, and I realized I didn't just want to be a consultant. I wanted to be a partner. And for 2 years, I partnered inside of that company. We were able to get it featured in major magazine outlets. We started to make sales. We got it. I literally pitched it to the first round of Shark Tank auditions. We got it up on the billboards in Times Square. And then 3 months before I was supposed to get married to my husband, my business partner told me he wanted to buy me out. And I was crushed. I was completely devastated because I'd spent 10
Wow.
years, not 10 years, 2 years of my life in this company, completely invested. And I felt like I wasn't going to be able to see that through to fruition, to have the success that I saw. I knew that was possible for it. And so we went back and forth with the lawyers. And suddenly, with my career, I'd always been very audacious with my asks. So when I wanted to write a screenplay that was about, three dudes, I just asked. And when I wanted to start Pilates and teaching that, I just asked, and I just leaned in and I would just go for it. I was very audacious and very courageous. But suddenly all these limiting beliefs of not enoughness, not worthy, and all the fears of being too girly or a woman, or all of the other
Mm-hmm.
forms of what I call to be plagiarized programming, were brought to light by quote unquote professional men, or lawyers who don't always send the nicest emails when they are not on your side. And so 3 weeks before I got married, we signed the buyout agreement. I walked down the aisle, flew off on my honeymoon, and was wondering, while 6 weeks in Italy with my husband, we were up in an Airbnb in the Northern Italian Riviera, and I was like, what am I going to do when I get back? And I thought of all my different interests. I figured out the body, I figured out relationships, I figured out business to a
Mm-hmm.
degree. And I thought that there could be some form of holistic company that I could use to transform people's stories. I just didn't know what it was. And I, after way too many espressos, leaped off the couch and I said, crown yourself. And my husband goes, what's that? And I said, I don't know, but that's the name of my company. And so I immediately went to work and doing the website and doing the logo and doing all this like entrepreneurial, what I call busy work or productive procrastination. But for a year and a half in my business, I didn't make a dime because I wasn't selling anything. I was just kind of producing things, dabbling, but really all those fears and doubts of judgment and rejection were really running the show. And it wasn't until I found out that I was pregnant with my first son that suddenly I was like, well, the version of me who I had become over that year and a half of quote unquote growing my business, but it was making nothing, was a complaining, blaming version of me, and it wasn't the one that I wanted to be the mother of my children. Because even though the title of CEO, the title of founder, that didn't scare me enough, the title of mom did. And so I had to elevate my role into what I wanted to really show my children. Was I wanted to show my children what a strong woman who's capable, who is able to, as we joke in in our household, I bring home the bacon, my husband fries it up because no one wants me cooking anything, and and we
Awesome.
just and I had to evolve, and I knew I'd overcome. I knew it was a mindset block. I knew it was self-limiting beliefs, and I
Mm.
knew I also had a 9-month deadline. So I figured I might expedite the process because I knew they were similar blocks and similar beliefs that I'd already overcome in my 10-year battle with bulimia. It just had manifested in the different form of it being in my business and in my finances. And so once I realized that, I knew I could get through it. I knew I could rewrite that story for myself. I just also knew I had a 9-month deadline. So I wanted to expedite the process. And I immediately got my first coach. I got certified in NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis. And then I went on from there. actually started building my business and, making sales like is required to have a business. And then I got certified in high performance coaching as well through the High Performance Institute. And it's been such a powerful journey. I'm a certification junkie, so I love learning about the mind, and my genius zone is really breaking down other people's success strategies and success processes that they don't even know that they're successful at, and then applying
Hmm.
those into a different area of their life where they're struggling.
I love it. So much of, right. I mean, I especially love the part of folks that build businesses and they're doing all this stuff, and you just kind of look at it and you go like, to what end? Like,
Yeah.
where is this going to get you? And then there's those other folks, right, that start a business. And I had another guest on, and he said, if you're starting a business and you're not solving a problem, don't start a business, right? And it was interesting because there's folks like you that are that have that aha moment, and they're like, okay, I need to pivot, right? And then they move on to kind of the important work of defining what it is they're doing and what problem they're helping people solve, and the value statement kind of what they're doing versus kind of the noise of having a small business, which is cool. I got to admit, right? It's cool to like, oh, first thing people do, they get their domains, and they get
Yeah.
all excited about the name. They design a logo, right? They get
Build a
business cards.
website. Oh yeah, my business
Yeah.
card. And it was such an eye-opening moment because I had my own private. I switched from teaching and freelancing at a studio to having my own private Pilates studio. So this is my third business, and
Wow.
so the fact that I doubted myself was a tenant to the fact of how low my self-worth was, because I'd
Mm,
already owned a Pilates studio that was like,
yeah.
I'd already successfully done it. I successfully had an e-commerce company. So like, but I still, it was the feeling. And so
Right.
I tell all my clients, feelings trump thinking every single time. And our emotional stories, the ones that really have an unconsciously decided upon emotion and
Hmm.
belief system behind them, are the ones that are running our default programming on a regular basis. And
Yeah.
so that was exactly what I did. I bought the domain, I got the website, and it's fun to. There's a difference though between playing business owner and actually owning a business. And you mentioned something that was so powerful about values and having a values aligned business, because when I first started my e-commerce company with my partner, there were many ways that we were playing business owner. Like I remember my business partner wanted to get an office, and I disagreed with that decision, because I was like, we don't need an office. Like we need a storage container for all the product, but we don't need an office. And
Hmm.
and I remember my investors were like, why are you guys putting the money into the office? But I didn't have as much say as I wanted to have.
Yeah.
So that was a decision though. But that was again a decision of playing business owner versus actually being a business owner and looking at it from a profit first standpoint, which is one of my favorite books on the planet for business, by Mike Malkowitz.
I love it when I help small business owners. Um, right. It's so easy though to get sucked into that
Oh, it's so
vortex.
easy. And
It's
and
so easy.
and we do it with other things too. Sometimes we can play married, we can play
Yeah.
relationships, we can play, oh, like it's so fun to play house. Now I'm not saying that when you move in with someone that it isn't a committed relationship, but
Hmm.
sometimes there is that level, and it's an emotional and an energetic level of commitment,
Hmm.
and an understanding. So like when my husband and I, my forever husband, because I was married before, but my forever husband, I pulled a Brittany when I was 22. It was a very, very
Yeah.
silly. It was
It's
a
yeah.
very
We
silly
all
move.
do.
Like
Yeah.
I,
I'm on
like I
number two
said,
too.
playing marriage, right? Playing house. So I was playing house in my early 20s, and then when I met my husband, I was like, oh no, like that was it. Like I knew and he knew. And so when we moved in together, it was like we were already committed on like a soul level. Like we just knew.
That's
but
awesome.
but we can so often, like you see it at the gym too, when someone's playing at working out, and you see it when it's that person who's there all the time, but you never see them making any progress. Like they haven't lost any weight, they're just there going at a nice, comfortable speed on the elliptical, and they're not
That,
actually growing.
yeah. I spend my time at the gym. My wife will tell you I spend my time at the gym talking to people. I don't, people walk up to, I know I used to coach football in the area, so everyone knows me. And um, I have people just come up to me, and I'm like, oh, this is easier than working out. Let me just go talk to this person and talk to that person. And then pretty soon, like 2 hours have passed by. I'm like, okay,
Yeah, you're
that's
like,
my
oh,
time
I
at the gym.
got my workout
Not exactly what I
in.
came for, right? But it's all good. But I think, just kind of that intention, right? Like
Hmm.
like starting with the end in mind and setting realistic and concrete goals. A lot of people don't do that, and they get excited about, especially like the creative people, right? The people that are artists or bakers. No offense to you if you're an entrepreneur and you
The
own
unicorns,
yeah, if you,
especially
that's
if they're
awesome.
multi-passionate,
Yeah,
like especially if they have
yeah.
multiple passions and they're like I had one client who was dead set initially when I met her. She's like, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I said, Elon Musk is a serial entrepreneur. How successful have each of your entrepreneurial ventures been? And she's like had like made $100 in one and like
Yep.
maybe a
Yeah,
thousand dollars in the other. And I was like, you're
that's
not
a
a
hobby.
you're a broke hobbyist. That's what like that's
Hmm.
what you are. So let's focus and hone all that energy that you're spending in all these different places into one space that aligns all of it.
Hmm. I love it. So what's the difference, right? Like how can some people be successful and other people, just don't make it or self-destruct or can't cut it.
It really comes down to the stories that we're telling ourselves. Like I just gave a TED talk recently, and in it I said that we're constantly making decisions every day, consciously or unconsciously. And a lot of times the stories that we tell ourselves are the ones that are most unconsciously decided on and the ones that we're seeing play out on a daily
Mm,
basis, as reality, as our perception of what reality is. And so it's those stories that really cause the self-sabotage for the ability that to be able to move forward. There there's that story, and there is the other piece of, especially that I've seen with high achievers who have already achieved some sort of success in some other field. So they've achieved success in some other field or industry, or even in their own field or industry, and they've gotten to a level where they're comfortable. And from that level of comfort, there comes the fear of risking, because there's the perception that there's more to lose. And so from that story, from that perception, that story that they're telling themselves that there's more to lose, they kind of are at that coast at that level of comfort for a
mm,
while, but eventually they're going to run out of gas. And so what I call that the pedestal problem, where you're putting your success, your career, your achievements, whatever it is that you've done, up on this pedestal. And it's fine there, but I'm from Southern California and there's earthquakes and pedestals get knocked over all the time. And the
yep.
problem is that what got you there to that space of success and comfort is what's going to catapult you farther. But typically, what that is it's courage, and it's a fear of moving away from something that you don't want. So, what I
Hmm.
do a lot of times with a lot of leaders is we're shifting the motivation strategy from a fear-based strategy to one of long-term vision. Because a fear-based strategy is basically you want to move as far and away from what you don't want as fast as possible. So
Hmm.
let's say you are leaving your corporate job, you hate your boss, you want to move as far away and you want to start your own business, your own consulting firm. So you want to move as far and away from that as fast as possible. But there's only so long that you can drive while looking in the rearview mirror before you crash. And so that's the crash of self sabotage, is because people are driving away, they're hitting their gas pedal really hard with the battle cry of freedom. And then they have lost track of the vision, because eventually you have to turn your head around and look at the long-term vision, look at the values and the sustainability of what you're building, and actually build the systems and structure around you to support yourself in that growth. And so those are a few of the problems that I see with when people actually start self-sabotaging. It's their story, it's their motivation strategy, and it's the lack of the long-term vision and the lack of support structure around them.
I love it. Yeah. I heard a great quote, another podcast guest, and she said, it's really hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle.
Yep.
And I was like, ooh, That's an amazing visual, right? And so while you're in this hustle to do what you think is important to build a business that you think is going to be successful and think is right, that need for somebody on the outside of the bottle to help you, right, to see what you're not seeing, to guide you down the road, and um, I think some of us have had the pleasure of having mentors and executive coaches, and they always have things that you're like, wow, like I didn't see that at all, right? You're just totally blind to it, whether it's something personal that you need to change, or something about a business issue or whatever. And they always have a different perspective, and
Yeah,
and
and
it.
it pays to challenge the perspective. Like I was just on a call with one of my clients, and she was planning out this long 10-month program, but it was her first launch of this new program. She's been a very successful entrepreneur in her style of business, but this was a little different than the previous things that she's launched. And I said, look, I said, I understand that, I said, for one, on the one side, I see how you are so successful. And I acknowledged her that she was so successful for seeing her programs and products for the long term. Like her business, she's in the game for the long term. And so that's very different
Hmm.
than a lot of entrepreneurs when they first start out, is they do short-term things and they're scared of those short-term losses because they have short-term thinking, and so they're not thinking about the longevity of like a 10-month program or something like that.
Hmm.
But because we were working around the construct in her paradigm of time, I said, so why? I said, let's just challenge this perspective for a little bit as to why you're beta launching a program that's going to be 10 months of a commitment when you don't even know if it works yet. And she was like,
Wow.
oh, okay. And so we kind of talked through some different options and different ways that she could test it and see it, rather than having this 10-month long commitment where by the end of it, she could be drained, she could be exhausted, she could feel like it doesn't work. And I'm like, that may not necessarily be true, but it could be the amount of time that you're giving to it. So that's like my job from being on the sidelines of my clients' businesses, my clients' leadership strategies, my clients'
Hmm.
families, seeing how they're interacting in all the relationships, seeing all the players that are coming into play, and seeing what are the bullets that they really could be dodging, or the you know tackler. I love sports metaphors, but I don't watch sports. So like the other players on the field that could tackle them that they aren't even aware of, that could be in their blind side.
Right. Yeah. The guidance of an executive coach or a coaching company to help you through this, to share all the mistakes that they made and bring those to bear, or to share other clients' mistakes. Right. It might not even be that person, but oftentimes you're able to say, "Oh, yeah, this other client tried that, and here's the results." Um,
Yeah, and I think the best results to find are someone's actual success strategy. So I mean,
hmm.
like I tell my clients who have very similar businesses, is that, even if you have similar businesses to another person, your persona, your values, your significant process that you give to your clients is going to be slightly different than this other person. So this other person's strategy may be something that you can test, you can play with, you can try on, but it may not work exactly the same for your audience. So it
Hmm.
all, like for me, it always comes back to looking at somebody's personal success strategy for what's made them successful. And like one of the things, to give you the example with my client today, um, the success strategy that I saw playing was counter to the longevity of having a 10-month long program. So
Hmm.
I'd seen through enough times, because we'd been working together for a while, that having these longer projects actually was causing an energy suck by the end of it. So because I've been on the sidelines for a while, and because I've been studying her business for a while, I was able to give that reflection back to something that's a little different that she could play with, that might be a different strategy. Because as Marshall Goldsmith says, what got you here won't get you there. So how you've approached
Love it.
problems in the past, how you have searched for solutions, the strategies and systems that have worked before, they probably won't work for you in this next evolution of whatever it is that you're growing into. And that's the
Hmm.
process of constant never-ending improvement, which is Kaizen.
Yes, I love it. We didn't really talk about the name of the company, right? Crown. We did kind of before we started the recording, but
Yeah.
Crown Yourself, which maybe just talk about the name a little bit, right? And then I have some questions, just like and I bring that up because one of the questions is, as people try to become the kings or queens, right, of not only their own business but their lives, right? And they're trying to be the best parent they can be, and be the best business owner, and be the best business partner or employee, right? Regardless of where you are in your stage in life. Um, how did Crown Yourself kind of come about as the perfect name for what you're helping your customers with?
Well, I've been a pageant girl since I was 15, so that's a part. That was a part of it. I've always loved princesses and crowns and whatnot. So that's my inner 5-year-old coming out. But beyond that, I remember I was in the Miss California USA pageant, and it was after I'd battled 10 years of bulimia. And I was about to go on stage. It was my first ever bathing suit, bikini pageant. Not bathing suit pageant, but my first ever bikini pageant, where for the first time in my life, I felt confident and strong and proud of my body. I was proud of how I looked. I was proud of the way that I got to how I looked. I didn't get it through starvation or dieting or forcing or over exercising. I got it in a really aligned, loving, compassionate way. And I
Hmm.
remember walking out on stage in front of a crowd of 4,000 people and looking at these shadows of judges. And I just thought, like, in that moment, it did not matter two hoots whether I won or
Hmm.
not. It did not matter those 7 judges' opinions of me, because for me in that moment I crowned myself. And so the
I love it.
name came beyond that, because when you think of a queen or a king, from the moment that they're born, when they're in that lineage of monarchy, and they're in that lineage and they are being groomed from the moment that they're born to rise to their reign, to be on the throne. They are being trained as a leader. And yet so often, especially nowadays, we're not trained to be leaders. We're trained to be employees. We're trained to be fault to do in what to think, not in how to think critically or how to think creatively or how to find new solutions to problems until maybe you go to college. But in the in traditional education, we're not really receiving that level of leadership training, and from what I've seen. And I also think that as children, so often when they say they have a dream,
Hmm.
so many people, so many jaded parents will be like, "Oh, that's not realistic. Oh, but when you grow up, you'll really see what the world is really like." And I remember when I was 16 years old,
Mm.
and I've always been a big dreamer and a big doer. And I'm very grateful for my parents, because I saw them build a multi-million dollar business despite my dad being an addict until literally 4 years before the day he died. So I saw them build a business. Took them 30 years to get to that point because of the
Hmm.
addiction and because of those struggles. But at the same time, I saw that it was possible. And they always believed in me. They never shied away from me saying that a dream was possible. So I was very grateful that they always believed in my own possibility and potential. But so often, so many kids are not. So often, kids say they want to be something when they grow up, and life, people, adults will project
Hmm.
their own plagiarized programming of like, oh, that's not possible. And it's only because it wasn't possible for us. It's only because something didn't happen for us that suddenly we have that perception and this belief that it's true for us. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily true for this kid. And so I thought of, for a child, a princess, a prince, is being raised just surrounded by a council of people who are literally grooming them to lead. So
Hmm.
they're not faced with the doubt that they ever are going to get to that position. No, they're going to be on the throne at some point when, said monarch dies.
Yeah.
So So they're going to rise into that space. And at any moment, basically, they have to be ready because that monarch is a human being and that person could die at any point because that's what happens with being human. And so,
Hmm.
how often are we surrounding ourselves with a council who is expecting us to achieve our dream, not doubting us, not questioning us, but expecting us to, who is holding us to a higher standard of leadership,
Hmm.
who is challenging us beyond what we believe that we're capable of in the moment in order to grow and rise. And that's really what Crown Yourself is all about. It's about, yes, you crown yourself with your own internal and innate worthiness and deservingness as a human being who's blessed and created to be here on this planet for a really powerful purpose. I don't know what it is, but in your heart you normally do. And a lot of times that purpose is kind of beaten out to some degree from what I call plagiarized programming because we kind of know what it is in childhood. Because for
Hmm.
me, one of the questions I always ask my clients is like, who did you want to be? What did you want to do when you were about 5 to 6 years old? Because about at that age, it's in the imprint period in psychology from 0 to 6. And right at that age is when we are open to so much possibility. We aren't yet accepting the societal standards. We aren't yet, it's not an age where our brains are in the social period. We're accepting what's socially acceptable by our peers. So it's
Right.
in this beautiful age. And my son is like entering into it right now. He says he wants to be an astronaut and live on Jupiter because he's so done with Earth. Um,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I was like,
Sign me
that's
up. Let's go.
wise statement, kiddo. But he like that phase is of possibility. And for
Hmm.
me, I wanted to be a princess. I wanted to be a writer, a director, a producer, a storyteller. And so that's exactly what I'm doing now. I am
Hmm.
I have a company called Crown Yourself. I am the writer of my content. I'm the director of my team. I was the executive producer because I was investing the money into my business. And
Hmm.
I'm producing the content, the show, the podcast, I'm producing results for my clients as well. And so I'm doing exactly what I thought I would be doing as a 5 to 6 year old. It's just not in the exact form that I thought it would be in. But that's the evolution. So when you think of like who is it that you wanted to be? What was it that you wanted to do when you're about 4, 5, 6 years old? That's your untainted self. And so if you can think of how are you applying those same things to what you're doing now. So maybe like my son, he loves math, he loves science, and he wants to be an astronaut and travel in space. He also loves performing. So I figure, first dancing space show on Jupiter, totally possible. But
I love
there's
it.
so many possibilities that we aren't even allowing ourselves to imagine yet. And our
Right.
imagination and our curiosity is such a key point to creativity, to creating something new, to create, because everything that has been created to this point was man made. And
Hmm.
so that the systems that have been created, the experiences, the businesses, everything was created. So if you don't like a system that was created, or you think you can create a better system, you can too, because that initial system was created by humans. So we can
Hmm.
constantly look at the systems, the industries, the spaces that we're in and say, well, if this is something I'm not liking, how can I recreate this? This was created by humans. How what if what if we just create something new? How can we find that solution?
Hmm. It just makes a lot of sense, right? I had the opportunity. I just flew back from Baltimore this week, and on my way to Baltimore, I was flying from Phoenix Sky Harbor here in Arizona. I was flying out to Baltimore, and sitting next to me, one row across, was Amber Bartow, who is Miss Arizona. Just because you mentioned
Yep.
pageants, and I've met Amber before. I've had lunch with her. She was gracious enough to um, have lunch with my daughter and I, who wanted to get onto the ASU dance team, and she was a member of the ASU dance team. Been in pageants all her life, and I just remembered. I said, "Oh, what are you doing? What do you?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm doing all this charity stuff, but I'm going to go be Miss America." And I was like thinking to myself, right, kind of this predisposed thinking, right, you and 10 million other people are going to go be Miss America. Um, and here she was just this week sitting next to me on the plane as Miss Arizona on her way to compete to be Miss America. And damned if I'm not gonna, be rooting full force for her because she is delivering upon, when I had lunch with her, that was wow, probably like 3 years ago, and she said that she goes, "I'm gonna eventually be Miss America," and I was like, "Yeah, right." Um, and then I'm like, "This is awesome!" Like she set her mind to it. She has a great support system, coaches, right, and her
Mm-hmm.
dad and her mom are amazing people. Shout out to John Bardo if you're listening. It, everything that you're saying, right? I mean, you just kind of, it just makes sense once you're saying it. I think people struggle to find that path, right? I think they meander around a lot without anyone to help guide them to the yellow brick road.
Well, I think also they're
What?
judging the path as well. So as they're on the path, they're judging, oh, I should feel happy with this, or I should feel grateful about this, or I should, instead of accepting if their heart is really in it. Instead of accepting, like, okay, let me
Mm,
just acknowledge and accept, because we can't, shooting yourself is like it's like looking at a marathon and saying, I should run the marathon. That does not mean you're actually in the marathon. In order to actually start, you have to accept that you're at the starting line, and that's
hmm
okay.
I love it. The what are maybe some tips, right, for folks that want to get better, do more, right, rise to their position of possibility. I mean that I think I love what you said, right? Like we doubt ourselves, society doubts us. There's all this like just stay down there, and I can't even say it's like by some social elite power that just wants everyone down there. It's just society in general, right? We're in a culture that everybody just wants you to, I can point back to my mom. And no offense, mom, if you're listening, but the old thing: just stay at your job, just be thankful, and just stay there forever. Be thankful you have a job, right?
Yeah.
That was the age old wisdom. Like, don't try something different. What do you mean you're going to go start your own company? Like, are you crazy? Just stay right where you are. There's security in that. I also blame her for being overweight, right? Because she tells me to eat everything on my plate, and you know, and I do, right? I do what my mom tells me to do, and here I am. So maybe what are some tips that folks could leverage?
Well, what are you curious about? Really sitting with that question and allowing yourself to not go for the default answer of I don't know. Because I don't know cuts you off from possibility. It actually restricts your subconscious mind from finding an answer and seeking a new answer and creating new neural pathways. Because our Carl Jung stated that our subconscious mind is connected to collective consciousness.
Hmm.
And so was working with one of my clients who came to me in like a rush. She had to find a real estate investor within the span of like 2 weeks. And she's like, mindset, like I'm up for anything at this moment. And so I was working with her and I kept on hearing her language of, well, I don't have an investor. I don't have an investor. And she kept on saying all the things she didn't have. And I said, yes, you do. And she goes, no, I don't. And I said, yes, you do. I said, but you are completely blocking yourself off from the possibility of ever meeting this investor, because she kept our subconscious mind will not, it likes clear commands, and so it will follow the exact commands that you're giving it, and it also
Hmm.
doesn't respond to negative. So if I say don't think about chocolate, that's what you're thinking about. So she kept on restricting her subconscious mind from seeing that potentiality of an investor. And so I said, what if you just started just shifting your language a little bit and saying, you do have an investor. You're just willing to be consciously aware of who this person is. And she started shifting her language and started saying, yeah, I have an investor. I'm so excited to meet who this person is. So shifting that emotional intensity from, acceptance to acceptance if she doesn't know who it is yet, to courage to start like
Mm-hmm.
reaching out and the courage to think of things differently, because that in itself can
Mm-hmm.
be a courageous act. And then started actually getting grateful and excited for this person who she was going to meet. Within 2 weeks, she
I
had her
love it.
investor. And so, first, starting with your curiosity. Second, watching your language, looking at what is the language, how are you directing your own answers in your own story? Because our language, we're consciously, if we can take that step back and listen to ourselves thinking, listen to ourselves talking, and from that more objective point of view, like I like to think of it like an anthropological point of view, like observing, like, what is Kimberly Spencer thinking today? Like, don't think that if you're not me, but like,
Yeah, yeah. I wonder
what
what
is
you
what
think.
does Michael Grace think about this? Like, oh, that's an interesting way that he's thinking about this problem. He's thinking about it in this way. And what if I thought about it this way? So allowing yourself to
Mm-hmm.
question your own thought patterns, your own language, and then being comfortable with the questions. Being comfortable with the unknown of the questions. Because so often as adults, we crave certainty and predictability.
Mm-hmm.
And as if these past 2 years have taught us anything, like the only thing certain is change. And so how can we get comfortable with leaning into that unknown and finding that trust that the answer is going to come, and allowing for the space and the grace of the question without having an answer? Because so often, for so many things, especially for the problems, especially if you're looking at solving big problems,
Mm-hmm.
which I know many of your listeners are looking at, like
Mm-hmm.
if you're looking at solving really big industry wide problems, especially in massive industries like healthcare, that's going to take some space to actually think about new solutions, to remove yourself from the current system of how things are done and how things are operated. Because that's so often we just kind of blindly accept, oh, well, that's just how things are done. Well, when did we decide that that was true? When did we decide that that was the way that things were going to be done? What if we
Mm-hmm.
decided on something different? And then exploring those options. So, following your curiosity, listening to your language, taking that objective point of view, and then asking questions and creating space with the answers of the unknown.
I love that, right? And I often, um, people like, what are the top three things, or give me a list, and they want to fill out a form and solve their life, right? They want the form to be multiple choice, right? And they like the teacher to give them, half the answers up front, and then they like to look over at their peer and fill out the rest of it. And sometimes those open-ended questions, right, that you have to have a conversation with yourself, those are the most difficult, right? Because you kind of have no one to really blame, and I think, struggle with
Mhm.
ourselves, perhaps more than others.
I think it's because we forget how powerful we really are.
Mm,
Because we're so often we're looking to something external, somebody else to have the answer, somebody else. And yes, it does start from blame, which I think is one of the most insidious problems of our society right now, is blame,
mhm.
and lack of ownership. But once we can actually take ownership, that what if all the answers are already inside of us? What if we acknowledge how powerful we actually are and looked at answers from that space? Then that can produce a whole nother realm of opportunities and solutions.
I love it. So part of, right, believing in yourself, and doing the work to elevate yourself, to your potential. I talk a lot about elevator pitches, right? I have the opportunity to shape and develop lots of young consultants. We call them business analysts, and I always, they're like, yeah, I don't even know what to tell people that I do, right? And I'm like, you should always have a really solid elevator pitch. And people struggle with that, right?
Mhm.
When we, like, what do you do? Or tell me something about yourself. And they're like, I don't know. And they just kind of sit there and mope along. And I'm like, wow, that was a great first impression. That person thinks you do nothing and you're depressed. Is that really
Ah!
what you wanted to leave them with? And it was like, I just didn't know what to say. Um, but then sometimes people are like, well, I am the this and the that, and they just,
Mhm.
they sound, there's a great book on my bookshelf behind me at work, not there. The book behind me here says How to Be a Unicorn. It's not a real book, but I saw it and I had to buy it. There's a book behind me at work that says "Don't be an asshole," um, right? And it's a great business book about like how to be confident without being just coming off like an asshole. But
Mhm.
how do people create that message? Like how do people brag a little bit on themselves, feel good, but don't come off as like, wow, okay, let me get out of your way.
First of all, I think that comes from leading with a heart of service, which is why I again circle
Mm,
back to leadership and the king or queen metaphor. It really comes from, like, nobody loves a king or queen who's all about themselves. We also call that a dictator.
hmm.
We can also take out the tater sometimes. But
Yes.
a servant leader is leading with the heart of what is possible for their people and what is possible for other people to achieve. And
Hmm.
so I, like, my contention in my TED talk was that your life is a testimony for possibility, and people are watching how you live your life according to that testimony. So it is in the energy of how you be and how you present that statement first and foremost. And if you present it from an attitude of service, then
Mm,
suddenly it's no longer for you, it's for others. It's for blessing others with your talents and your ability. um, I'll give you a story. One of my clients joked with me when he first hired me. He said, if you can help me buy my plane in a year, I'll know that this investment was worth it. And I said, okay, challenge accepted. At the end of the year, he ended up buying his plane. And when he shared about it inside of my community, he really approached it from sharing and showcasing it with what's possible when you attach the right strategies and business and the right business, and a business that lights you on fire, and coming at it from a heart of service. He was able to share about that huge win. I also had another client who was looking
mm,
to buy a really, really nice car. And I said, well, what would that car represent? Like, what would you be able to do if someone saw you? Because yes, there will be like that one person who thinks you're a jerk just because you drive a BMW. But there will also be that one or two people who will look at you and ask, how did you do it? And I said, so what will that thing, that, nice bag, that nice car, that nice outfit, that nice home,
hmm.
what will that allow you to share as your testimony of what is possible for them, not for you? You've already achieved it. What will that allow you to do as what's possible for them, given the strategies, the systems that you put into place that served you, and how can you use that to serve beyond? And so that's the one piece of the energy, that it really must come from service. And secondly, I have a fill in the blank statement for your listeners for this statement. It's basically, I help, fill in the blank of who you help, do or have or be or some form of action verb, so that voila. So fill in those three pieces. Who do you help? What do you help them do? What do you help them create? What do you help them transform? So I help visionary
Mm,
leaders transform their self-limiting stories, build their empire so that they achieve their full potential and sparkle in holistic success. That's very much that's what I do. That's who I help. I'm not here to help the victim mindset, blamey person who just wants to, be mired in their excuses. That's not my person. I help the visionary leaders who are striving to make more of an impact so that they can make more of an income, yes, so that they can make more of an impact. Like when I start working with a client, oh my god, like when I read their forms, that I have an intensive form that they fill out where I get to learn everything about them and what they want and what they desire. And when I see the good heartedness of what they really want to create, I feel so honored and blessed to be in a position where I get to see that. And now I get to hold them to that standard. I get to hold them to that standard
hmm.
of who they're saying they want to be and who they're saying they want to become, which means that I'm going to be transforming their self-limiting stories, because those will come up. And I'm going to be helping them build their empire to expand their impact and their income. Yes. And that purpose and potential piece is so essential when you can really give that reason as to why. That last piece, of the fill in the blank, like, why is it that you do what they do? Like, what will the people that you serve be able to feel, be able to understand, be able to know, be able to feel like they've achieved because they've worked with you in some capacity? If you can just fill out that statement and then approach anytime you're presented with giving an elevator pitch or sharing a bit about what you do, and doing it in a very aligned way, that you're coming at it from a place that you are giving literally a testimony for possibility. You're not saying that you have to convert people to what's possible. Like,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily will I convert somebody who's in a very blamey, victim minded space, that it's possible for them to achieve certain things, because their perceptions are not there. They're not seeing what's possible. They want to have that filter of like, well, I can't do it because X, Y, and Z, versus, and it's my job as a communicator to be able to adapt my communication to see, perhaps maybe if I could see them, help them see it from this perspective, then maybe they'll be able to see that those results could be possible for them as well. But it really is up to us to approach it from that level of service and servant leadership.
I love it. Um, we've covered a bunch, and I just love it. Right, I love the name. I think everyone's trying to be the best version of themselves that they possibly can be, and folks are at different positions in the journey. I often get comments like, "Well, that's great, but I'm not an executive, or I'm not this," and I'm always like, "Be the best you wherever you are. I don't care if you work at McDonald's, right? Be the best version of yourself wherever you are in your career, in your personal growth. I don't care, right? All these concepts can totally apply to any person in any industry, in any job. And that doesn't mean you still shouldn't have a mentor, and maybe you don't need an executive coach, right? But you should be following some sort of a program of growth, both personally and professionally. So,
Mhm.
um, Kimberly, thank you for taking the time. And you're not in the U.S. right now. You're
No, I've been living in Australia for the past 2 years.
well, I put another shrimp on the Barbie, or whatever the
You put a
colloquialism
shrimp on
is
it.
for.
It's very strange having warm Christmases. Like, I'm like, this is like summer, right? Like, I'm seeing Santa walk around in board shorts.
This is awesome. Thanks for joining us from the land down under. I appreciate you taking the time. And to find out more about the work that Kimberly's doing, her website is www.crownyourself.com. Um, and there's all kinds of information and links, and you can get in contact with her. You can read about the coaching that she does if you're in need of that. We'll have all those links down below in the descriptions, both on audio and video. So again, Kimberly, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.